Looking back at your preliminary task, what do you feel you've learned from it, from the progression to the full product?
Within the past 7 months, I think that we've come so far because our preliminary task was originally to create a short video of someone walking into a room and asking for something. The task had to involve things like match and on action,
180-degree rule.
Yeah, and 180-degree rule. So I think that we've learned a lot since then that we can now incorporate into our final piece.
Considering that we came into AS Media knowing absolutely nothing and then having to produce an actual coursework piece.
Our coursework was much more in depth compared to the preliminary task. There was more complicated shots, and there was just everything was more planned and just organised. Really.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It was the first time that we had to properly use a HD camera, so we had to learn what everything on it did to be able to use it properly, like how to hold it, like how to effectively film footage.
Keep it steady.
Yeah,
the tripod as well. Yeah.
We learned a lot of technique through this, which helped us.
The software we used, that was new. For our preliminary task, we used iMovie on these Macs. We found this really difficult though. It was hard to edit like each individual shot. So therefore, for our coursework, we used the Serif Movie Plus 5 on the actual computers. And this was a lot easier because it had a wider range of titles to choose from. And it was easy to kind of like choose each clip, kind of extend it, shorten it, make it more steady,
and the
make
sound
it less blurry.
as well.
Yeah, the sound quality was better.
Yeah, and you could have lots of different tracks on there and edit it how you wanted it, and we found that the more specific the programme, we found it the better.
Like for our sound as well, we used a lot more free sound this time because we also originally tried to do some voiceovers and it sounded quite fake, but then when we progressed and we learned how to alter those mistakes, it became successful compared to some YouTube sounds which sounded quite fake and unrealistic.
And on this iMovie, there was only a few sort of sounds to choose from, whereas using free sound on the internet, there was so many more that we could pick from that sounded more realistic and authentic.
Should we talk a bit about our time management then throughout both of the projects?
Time management.
I think that we learned a lot from this because originally we didn't really know that much. We didn't know how much we would have needed to communicate with each other, how much planning out we would have had to do, and how much time we would have had to actually spend in the meeting.
Yeah,
because
It was, yeah.
we constantly had to message each other. We had to message our actor to make sure he knew when we were coming, the location issues, sort of messaging who we'd get in touch with for that. They were all key aspects that
For
we
our
learned.
original task, we originally done us three as actors and we done the whole thing ourselves.
Yeah.
We done it in our own
It was a lot
home,
easier.
so we didn't have to cope with that. Whereas our original location we weren't able to use, so we had to then email some teachers and find new locations, and this took a lot of time of organisation, which we didn't think we needed to do.
As well though, it's finding the proportion of how long you need to film and then edit and things like that. With our preliminary task, we wasn't really sure. It was giving us an amount of
We
time
just
to
took
do
like
it.
a week
Yeah, just to
to
see.
film.
We wasn't really sure of how long. We didn't really realise how much editing time we would need. So for this, we spent a lot of time editing, which I think benefited our whole project.
Yeah, that was something we really learned about from the progression.
We had to study titles a little more in depth because that's what our main task was about. So
With our preliminary, titles weren't a requirement, but with our coursework they were.
So for our preliminary, we used pretty basic ones. We didn't know how to bring them in. We didn't know what would fit. Whereas now we've picked up more skills.
We just sort of had like the end, starring da 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 da,
Yeah.
filmed by da 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 da. But with we used serif again for our titles, so we used like a particular font, a particular colour. We used white to sort of like pureness and kind of make a contrast between the two.
We tried to use quite a lot of camera shot types into our preliminary task because from all the stuff that we learned, we tried to include it and we had to plan out what shots, how we wanted them to try and include more of a
We made a
range.
list of each shot that we'd use for each clip of footage.
Yeah, there was about over 30 shots that we had to organise for that, and we did stick to them, which is good.
I do think though that we found, whereas before we wanted to do as many different shot types as possible, we found out for our coursework that we do need to make ones especially for the project to fit it. So in our one we decided to do more close-ups because that is what we needed to portray the character.
It showed the facial expressions, the pain he's going through. things like that. And finally, mise en scène played a really big aspect in what we learned, because there was nothing sort of involved in the background or anything for our preliminary, but for our actual coursework we had to think about what would be in the background, what he'd be wearing, sort of what costume, props,
to give away the actor's personality,
Yeah.
but in small
that connote the
sections.
genre, the plot.
So in that way it left the audience with a sense of suspense and mystery and kept them guessing as well about the character's personality. Amelia, can you think of any examples in which a preliminary task you had to specifically think of mise en scène?
Well, in our preliminary task, the plot was really basic. We just had Cameron walking up the steps and he goes through the door. So it didn't matter like what the weather was like, what he was wearing kind of thing, because it wasn't a specialised specific plot. Whereas in our one, we had a soldier, so we had to think about what he'd be wearing in his downtime, what would be around him. Sort of we had his uniform folded up next to his bed, and we used the camera to show that, to convey his character. So that was an element of mise en scène. We had to think about where his bed would be, what kind of sheets he'd be wearing. All those things came into it.
Yeah, I think the same with my preliminary thing as well with the mise en scène, because we were filmed in a bathroom and there was mirrors around and things like that. We had to be aware of that while we were filming, and we found that when we look back at the footage, a lot of our cameramen were in the mirror. So we had to be aware of mise en scène.
That was something they definitely learned.
Yeah,
we
me and
definitely
Marie
learned that.
worked together on our preliminary task and Amelia worked in separate groups. So me and Marie learned that obviously when you take shots you need to be aware of the reflections around you and what can be caught which doesn't fit in with the task itself. But however, us three worked together when we done a Napoleon Dynamite video.
That was another practice kind of task that would help us with filming. And in this task we were required to create titles. It was a title project. So we based it on Napoleon Dynamite, and that involved filming lots and lots of different foods and sort of making titles and stuff. And that kind of helped us to know how hard it would be for our actual final coursework.
Because I think lighting was our main problem, because every time that we tried to film something there would either be a reflection of
shadow.
the plates or a shadow that we didn't want to be there, or it wasn't light enough or too dark, and it didn't fit very well, so we had to use similar locations and similar shots which we weren't very happy with. So for our main piece we needed to find a way to fix that, and hopefully we did.
For our final product, to overcome problems with lighting, we use things like lights on our phone, candles, we use lamps as well.
And we tried to get more subtle and delicate lighting instead of
to
straight.
get a shadow coming from somewhere into someone's face, for example.
But it's also finding the correct location in the first place as well. That's something we've really learnt about, and we did scout a lot more places for our final piece than we did for our preliminary.
For our preliminary and our practice tasks, we kind of rushed into where we thought it could be filmed anywhere. But that was something that we learned for our final one, that it can't just be filmed anywhere. You've got to think about all the aspects that play into it.
And we found a lot of issues with our location, because the one that we finally picked, there was so much clutter in this space that we had to move everything
That all had to be
before
cleared.
setting up.
Yeah.
And certain shots we couldn't use because we didn't have enough boards to put up, so we couldn't get the rest of the background because there were a lot of mats and poles on
And when
the
we
floor.
filmed in the opposite direction, you could see things in the background.
So we had to cut certain shots that we originally filmed because
Or we had to
realised-
refilm them.
But that's when we also had to learn a lot more about editing as well. So for like a micro example would be in the preliminary shot, preliminary task, one of our shots included cameramen. And then in the final piece, we had different things we didn't want in the shot in the corners, so we had to use Movie Serif Plus to crop the sides of it in order to get just the
That was
scene
a really
we
good
want.
benefit of Serif, because we were able to crop each individual shot, which we didn't know how to do on the iMovie.
Yeah, we learnt a lot with Serif over the time.
Yeah, we decided to use Serif because that's the one that we used for our previous task. We used the map once and the task came out harder because we weren't so sure
Yeah.
how
And we
to
found
use it properly.
tutorials on Google, on YouTube, that helped us with each aspect that we came to problems about.
Yeah, like our rewinding shot where it goes back and the blood comes back out of the bowl. We found that out from the internet.
Yeah, we
so
found out how to rewind
we tried to
footage.
incorporate as many different techniques as we could within our video.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other examples?
I think we should talk a bit more about time management and some micro examples for the that. And I found in the preliminary task it was very difficult to know when you were going to film. And I remember we spent, I think it was about an hour filming and only half an hour editing, so that really did help us out for the preliminary.
Yeah, so we didn't get a rough idea of how much that we would have needed, time that we would need to put in. And
Whereas with the Napoleon Dynamite practice, we knew that from our preliminary that we had to spend a lot more time on the editing in order to make it like authentic looking and sort of effective.
Yeah, so in that way the cuts, transitions a lot smoother, that everything fit within the shots.
Yeah.
So
What did
we
you
have
think that we learnt about camera movement over the time?
how to make it a little more steady, because initially most of our shots were quite shaky because we had quite jittery hands. We weren't able to hold it still, so we realised how big a part
Yeah, the tripod.
plays.
Yeah, we learned a lot about using the tripod.
In our actual main piece, we weren't able to have access to
Yeah,
the
there were
tripod,
none available on the day.
so we had to make one ourselves. So we got a board with wheels on the bottom that we could move around and stack
That was
up
quite
boxes.
helpful.
But thankfully we needed handheld shots in it as well, so that kind of eliminated
The
that
handheld
problem.
effect really helped us.
Yeah,
Because that's what we aimed for, because we thought that we didn't play at our weaknesses, and then it actually came out as a good result.
It gave the effect that someone was sort of watching them. Like it's not sort of like a homemade movie, but like they were filming and watching them at the same time.
So it gives a little bit more of a sense of mystery.
And enhanced the thriller genre that we were going for.
But overall, I think that we have learned a lot through our preliminary tasks and
Without the
and how to work
preliminary,
together.
we wouldn't have been able to do hardly any of the things that we could do now. We just wouldn't have had the knowledge.
no.
And how we distributed the work was a lot better as well. Like we set certain props for each of us to bring in, certain tasks for each of us to complete, which we had to meet by certain deadlines. So
Yeah.
in that way, it showed more organisation within our group instead of we didn't know where we were going. Because we communicated a lot more within our group this time.
Yeah, the preliminary was the bare minimum of like things we had, our resources were bare minimum. But we made sure that with our final coursework piece that we had, we were more organised, planned, props, things like that. So it really did.
Also, the
benefit
blog
us.
really helped us with our organisation and time management, because with our preliminary we didn't have a blog, we hadn't set one up then. So for our final coursework piece we were able to keep in touch with each other on that, show how far we'd got, what we'd had left to do, and just sort of the progression to the final product.
I think also though, with our Napoleon Dynamite piece, we didn't really use social networking to communicate with each other to organise things, so that played a massive role in our time management and organisation.
And we also learned a lot through how to make our character more effective as well. For instance, his makeup and what he was wearing, because we watched
we
YouTube
researched a lot.
tutorials on how to create a shading effect, on how to make it look like our character stumbled to
Stubble
increase
effect.
to make it more appropriate.
And I researched things like war poems to see how the character would be feeling, and then we could direct our actor really effectively to show how we wanted him precisely to be played.
So it showed us that we needed a lot more in-depth research.
And we
to
also,
make our character believable.
Got in touch with our peers, like outside of media as well, to find out their opinions on how they think we've done, how we could improve, what they liked about it, because after all they are our audience, target audience.
Feedback played a massive role in this as well, helping us grow and develop the whole task.
Originally, we done a even further rough cut in different places around the school. For instance, the girls' toilets upstairs and the medical room. And that's when we realised that they weren't suitable locations for this, and that we had to find more. And we found this also through asking audience members their opinion of if they thought this fit in with the scene or not, and they said they didn't, so therefore that helped.
They were all problems that we found that we had to deal with along the way, from the progression of it to our final product.